Hi guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, karibu sana. Welcome to Make an Impression. My name is Jean and I help shy women overcome their fear through faith and bold action. And that's really just what all Make an Impression is all about. Now we are in the August series, the Evolving Woman series. If you did not watch our first video that went up last week, but one, please go ahead and watch because it's going to give you sort of like a background into what we're talking about. But essentially, an evolving woman is not just one who is rising upwards, but we can also look at the woman who feels like they are evolving, but they're evolving in the downwards trajectory. And that's the woman that I kind of have been focusing on, or really is the woman that I was thinking about when I started the Evolving Woman series. Now, today we are going to be picking a very particular woman that I love that has been featured in the Old Testament as one of the women that we really look up to or talk about when we think about boldness, when we think about faith in action, when we think about obedience, when we think about women who represented God in the Old Testament. And this woman is Deborah. Now, before Deborah, to give it a little bit of a historical context, if you read the book of Judges from the beginning, you will see that before Joshua, when Joshua died, there came a new generation of Israelites who did not understand God, who were not following the principles of the Bible, or who were just living out of their own will. And let me tell you, the Israelites, kuna tu vile, by the way. But when you read, you realize that the Israelites were hard-headed people. They were not getting it. Like, they would suffer. God would put them into the hands of kings where they would suffer so much until they come back to God and ask for forgiveness and ask to be redeemed. And they would be redeemed, and then they would go back to their own ways. They would go back to worshiping Baals and all these things that they were doing that were contrary to God's will. And this would anger God. If you read through that story, you will see that Israelites would really anger God to a point that he would deliver them to their enemies and they would just be defeated. And that was like the story we kind of get from the first 3 chapters. You will realize that they would be delivered, wanarudi kwa the same situation. They would be delivered, they would go back to being who they were. They would be delivered again, and then they would go back. And it talks about a long time, 20 years, 18 years, all that time. And then out of nowhere, in the book of, in now chapter 4 in Judges, that is when we are introduced to Deborah. And the way we are introduced to Deborah, we are told that she was a prophetess and also a judge. Now, when I take into context, because I really like to apply the Bible practically so that I can see myself as Deborah in my current situation and see what qualities was God looking at, or what did God see in Deborah that he actually chose her? Because we are told that during that period, God would raise up judges that would deliver Israelites from their misery. And so Deborah was one of the women that God raised up, and she was a judge. She was not only a judge, but she was also a prophetess. And when I think about a prophetess, I think about a woman of faith, because you've got to have faith and you've got to be able to pray to get to a point where you can deliver God's message. That's basically what a prophet or a prophetess does. And so for me, Deborah is a really good example of an evolving woman in the current state, or in the period that she was. Can you imagine being the first woman to actually be mentioned as the judge and a prophetess during those times? And also, she was the first woman who decided to go to war, or didn't actually decide, but told Barak that he's going to join him. She's going to join him when they're going to war, because Barak could not believe that he would defeat that king. Then he was called, I think, Sisera, I don't know how they mention it, but that king was feared because he had such a mighty army, and so anybody who would try to confront him, they would of course be defeated. And so here we encounter Deborah telling Barak that God has delivered Sisera into his arms, and if he's going to go to war and fight him, he's going to be able to win this war, and then the Israelites will be able to overcome the Sisera kingdom, or whatever it is that Sisera was leading at that particular point. And Barak was in doubt. Barak said, I'm not going to go to this war. unless I am going with you. And at that point, I would think probably Deborah would be like, no, my work is to sit here and be the judge and, judge people and give you guys prophecies of what God has said. But at that point, I see Deborah applying what I like to call bold action. She told Barak that, yes, I'm going to accompany you to this war, and God will deliver. God will deliver Sisera into our hands, and we are going to defeat him. But there was a but. So Deborah told Barak that because you have decided not to go to this war alone, or I don't know if that was the condition, but Deborah basically told him that God will deliver Sisera into the arms of the woman, where we go ahead to meet Jael. But today we are not talking about Jael, we are talking about Deborah. So the things that I pick, which I really want us to get out of this conversation today, is the first thing is we see in Deborah is that she was a woman of faith, because through her faith, she would be able to pray and she would be able to prophesy the things that God would put in her heart and tell people what to expect or what to anticipate, even speak to kings like Barak during that time and tell him that God has said that he will deliver King Sisera into his arms and into his hands, and the Israelites will see the victory. I also see Deborah as a woman of obedience, because when she received this instruction from the Lord, she not only just said it, but also believed that it was going to happen. So even when Barak said that you need to accompany me to war so that I can believe that we will be delivered, she did not hesitate. And out of obedience of what God had told her or what God had shown her in her visions or in her dreams, she stood in the front line. I mean, during those periods in the Old Testament, women never used to go to war, but we see Deborah standing in the front line with Barak and getting into war and going to fight because she believed that there was going to be victory. So I not only see faith, but I see a woman who moved gracefully in obedience. I see a woman who chose to actively participate in this war because she knew that there was going to be victory. I see a woman who was willing to take the bold action, which is what I keep talking to you guys about. And so whenever I look at this situation and these instances where Deborah was in and she was still able to activate her faith, and we see her doing that through a bold action, I see how possible it is for me in my current situation where I am working in faith, where God is telling me I need you to work in this situation. And sometimes God will put you in situations where it's uncommon, because for us women, we have grown in a society where there's things we decide to do right now that are uncommon. But because we believe, because we have faith that God has put us in these places and that He's going to enable us to go further, then that's when we activate our bold action. So just like Deborah, I hope that we choose to be women of faith, women who choose to walk in obedience and understand that sometimes victory does not have to come through aggressiveness, but just through obedience in what God has put in our hearts, then we are able to experience victory. I hope that just like Deborah, when we are called forth for the bold action, when we are called forth to take on that step, to move to the next level, to do something that is unfamiliar, to do something that is not expected, we will not hesitate, but we will choose to move forward and activate our faith. That's it for today's conversation. It really is to just pick the story of Deborah and see how to apply it in your life. As simple as that. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jane. This is Make an Impression, where I help shy women overcome their fear through faith and bold action. I hope you choose to stay. I hope you choose to hit that subscribe button so that we can grow together as women who are choosing to evolve, not only in this month of August, but going forward. Have a good one, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.